Hello, welcome to part 2 of my review video. So let's go to the next problem. A grocery store sells steaks for $6.10 per pound. What would the cost be of 2 3/5 pounds of steak? The hint helps us out a lot because we need to change from a fraction to a decimal. In case you forgot how to do that, you divide the numerator by the denominator. So basically, I have 2 3/5. I'm going to split it up into 2 3/5. I know that 2 in decimal form is just 2, but 3/5 in decimal form should be 6/10. And so when I combine them back together, I am going to get 2 6/10. So I know that 1 pound is $6.10. So how much would 2 3/5 pounds be? That's why we will multiply to get our answer. 0 times 6 is 6. 6 times 1 is, 0 times 6 is 0. 6 times 1 is 6. 6 times 6 is 36. Blank space here. 2 0 is 0. 2 1 is 2. 2 6 is 12. When I add it all together, I should get 15,860, but don't forget your decimals. You have 3 numbers behind your decimal, so I'll move my number 1, 2, 3 times. My total will be $15.86. On the back, we have these problems. These are just basic conversion questions. I know this one isn't very clear on whether you need a percent or a decimal. A decimal or a fraction. So let's look at the hint and just assume that we're doing both. And so remember, if you want to change a percent to a fraction, all you have to do is write it over 100. 144 over 100 is our perfect answer. However, if you wanted to simplify it a bit more, you could have divided by 4. And you could have gotten 36 over 25. So next we're going to be doing our decimal. To go from a decimal to from percent to a decimal, you have to divide by 100. And if you do all the math and do all your dividing, you should have gotten 1 44 as your answer. So here it is as a decimal form, a fraction form. Here it is as a decimal form. Next question we have is a fraction, and we're trying to change it to be a percentage. And if you don't remember how to go from fraction to percent, you can just go from a fraction to a decimal to a percent. So before I do all that, this is kind of a big number. I kind of want to simplify it a bit. If I divide by 5 on the top and the bottom, I should get 4 over 5. And hey, this looks familiar. Isn't it one of our benchmark fractions? You should have remembered what 4/5 is in decimal form, but in case you didn't know, it's 8/10. To go from 8/10 to percentage, we have to multiply it by 100. And so your answer should be 80%. Now with the coat with 40% off its regular price. So the way that I would have done this is just look at 40%, write it over 100, so it's going to be your fraction, divide by 10 to get 4, divide by 10 to get 10, not divide by 2, just one more time, so that simplified, it's 2/5. I need to change this to a decimal as well, and so with my decimals, I know that it's going to be 4/10. The same thing as I wrote over here. So we have our decimal, we have our fraction, and we have our percent. So this is kind of unclear, but basically you have to fill in the blanks. And so 1/4, we know that it's 25 hundredths. We also know that 1/4 is written like 1/4. And in percent form, it's just 25%. If you wanted to see a model, I would have just colored in 1 out of the 4. Now we have 4/5, also known as 4/5. 4/5 as a fraction is maybe harder to remember, but if you did this, never fear, because we know 4/5 is 8/10 or 80%. We should work smarter, not harder. So again, I have fifths, and I'm just going to color in 4 of them to symbolize 4/5. So now we have 7/10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 out of the 10. 7/10 in decimal form is literally, 7/10. Oops, I wrote it in the wrong spot. Oh no. And then you just write it how you say it. In this case, just 7/10. Last but not least, we have 38 hundredths, which looks like 38 hundredths. This is going to be a really long time to draw. But imagine that this was 50%, this is 25%, and right here was 35%, 38%. It's about this much. I'm not going to be exact about it, because that would take forever, so I'm just going to kind of estimate it, eyeball it, if you will. So fraction, or the decimal, you just write it how you say it, 38 hundredths. And then if you multiply 38 hundredths by 100, you would get the percent form. Which would be 38%. These are just some standard conversions from one to the other. Your benchmark fractions are this, this, and this. While this isn't necessarily a benchmark fraction, it is still important for you guys to kind of know how to convert the hundredths as well. Now we're going to be doing these questions, which are basically kind of like our bell ringer today with our percent proportions. So we should know how to do this. Split it up in 10 sections. And I know that we have a percent. Let's put it on top this time. So I'm going to kind of turn my paper to the side and do 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, and 90%. On the bottom, I know the total time is 20. And so because there's 10 sections, 10 goes into 20 2 times. I need to skip count by 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and 20. She hit the ball 35% of the time. So I know it's at least 30, and halfway between 30 and 40. Well, what's halfway between 6 and 8? 7. And that's how I know that if she's at bat 20 times and she hits about 35% of the balls that she's on bat at, she will be hitting 7 of the balls. It's the same idea with this next one. We have 40 people who made 3 cakes each, which is a total of 120 cakes. I know that 15% of these cakes are chocolate. So I need to split it up from 0 to 100%. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sections. And I know that from 0 to my total should be 120. So just like earlier, I'm going to split this up into my tenths. So that's 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, and 90%. On the bottom, I have 120 divided into 10 sections, which should be 12. So we have 12, 24, 36, 48. I'm going to write sideways now. We have 60, 72, 84, 96, 108, and then 120. We're looking at 15% of these cakes, and so I need to look for the one that's halfway between 10 and 20, as well as the one that's halfway between 12 and 24. I don't know if you guys remember this, but there's 2 ways you can find the middle number between 12 and 24. The first way is just add them together and divide by 2. 12 plus 24 is 36, divided by 2 is 18. The other way you could have solved it is by literally picking all the numbers in between 12 and 24. Then using your fingers and covering them up. So cover this up, this, this, and this until finally I get my answer in the dead middle, which is 18. Whichever one prefer, you could have done. If you have a different way, please show me in class. But this, either way you cut it, the answer is 18. This one a lot of people have trouble with because they don't really realize what's going on here. But basically there's a pizza party and this is how much is left after the pizza party. We have 11 slices of pizza that was cut into 8s. We have more than one whole pizza. One whole pizza is 100%. That means we have more than 100%. And so without doing any math, we could know that the answer is just, 137 and 5/10%. However, say you didn't know that. Well, you could always just, convert your fraction into a decimal and then go from there. So as you can see, I'm just dividing this just so you guys can see the math behind it. And as you can see, I have 1 and 375 thousandths. But to get from a decimal to a fraction, from a decimal to a percent, I need to multiply by 100. So if I do all that math, I would get this. I need my decimal 3 places. And so I would have gotten 137 and 5/10%. Last but not least, we have this paper. You didn't really have to do it per se. I just kind of wanted to let you guys have some practice. So like, what is 1/2 in decimal form? 5/10. What about this? 0.3 repeating. What about this? 25/100. This? 2/10. What about this? 125 thousandths. What about this? 1/10. These other 2 you will just have to just plain memorize. There's no easy way of like doing it. It's just memory. Another thing I did want to add is how 4/4, 2 2s is equal to 1. 1 is equal to 1, 0.0, or 100%. 1 whole is 100%. Just in case you guys weren't quite sure, I wanted to give you guys the rest of these. This is in your notebook, by the way, so you shouldn't have too much trouble doing it, but just in case. Fraction and decimal, you do numerator divided by denominator. Decimal to percent, you multiply by 100. Percent to decimal, you divide by 100. Decimal to fraction, you say it how you write it, and then simplify. These are just the key words that we went over today. If you had any, you can add them here. Rational numbers are numbers like decimals, fractions, and percents. These would be like -1.5, +2/3, stuff like that. 0.34. Integers would be like negative and positive whole numbers. -1, 2, -3, 8, stuff like that. Whole numbers are just all the numbers, but just not really negative. Naturally counting numbers are all the numbers except for 0. Do not include 0 in your natural counting numbers. 0 fits in your whole number category. And basically what I just said is reflected in this right here, minus the rational numbers part. Please remember that if you're going to change from improper fraction to a mixed number, you need to kind of divide it. Top in, bottom out. The only difference is that once you have your remainder, things get a little bit different. This will be your whole number. Your remainder will be your numerator. And your original denominator will stay the same. When you change from a mixed number to an improper fraction, we do what we call Texas popcorn. It looks like that because we have a T and we have a X, which means addition and multiplication. What's 3 times 1? 3. Plus 1, 4. Denominator, 3. Okay, home stretch. When you multiply fractions, you basically just multiply straight across. Like 1 over 2 times 1 over 2. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. Done. When you divide fractions, it's same, change, change. What that means is that you leave this the same, but you change your division sign to a multiplication sign, and you change your last fraction to its reciprocal, which is the flipped version of it. And then you just multiply across. When you multiply decimals, it's extremely similar to what you did last year. How you basically just, multiply like normal, but then you count how many numbers are behind the decimal point. In this case, we have 2, so I would move my invisible decimal 2 spots to get 2 tenths or 20 hundredths. Last but not least, we have dividing decimals. This is where the swoop, there it is, comes in handy because we're dividing decimals. This would be something like we have 3 tenths divided by 15, for example. Well, there's always an invisible decimal on the end, and I know I can't divide with this being a decimal. So I'm going to swoop it, which means I move it once to the right. I move this 1 time, so I'm going to move this 1 time. If I move this 2 times, I'd move the inside decimal 2 times. If I move it 3 times, you get the idea. As soon as I let go of my decimal, I need to bring it up so that it's in my answer. And then from now, I can divide like normal. 3 goes into 1, 0 times. 3 goes into 15, 5 times. 3 goes into 0, 0 times. And so 3/5 15 divided by 3/5 would equal 50. This is basically what's going on. A lot of students have the most difficulty with dividing decimals. I feel like you're also going to have difficulty with ordering the numbers on a number line, just like what we did here. But your notes should help you a lot, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask me tomorrow. All day, the whole class period will be dedicated to help you out. And so please make sure you write down all the questions that you have. That way we can work together to make sure you do well on the CBA. Thanks, and happy studying.